Hello and welcome to the Mind Report. I am Laurie Santos. I'm professor of psychology at Yale University.
And I'm Katherine Milkman, and I am an assistant professor of operations and information management at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. That's a mouthful.
And today we're going to be talking about the cognitive science of New Year's resolutions. We're recording this about a week into 2014, and if you're like many folks, you might already be dwindling on all those aspirational goals you set up just a few days earlier. And so we thought it might be fun to look at what new work in behavioral decision making says about how we can do better at keeping our resolutions, form them at the right time, and keep them going well into the new year. And so Katherine, who has been doing lots of research on how people can make decisions better and stick with their goals, is here to tell us how we can do this better. So Katherine, thanks for joining us on the Mind Report.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And so I wanted to start with some new work that you've been up to, looking at a new effect that you and your colleagues have been studying known as the fresh start effect. So first off, what is the fresh start effect, and why is it relevant for some of the New Year resolutions that we see coming up nowadays?
Yeah, the fresh start effect is a phenomenon where we pursue our aspirations with renewed vigor following the start of a new cycle. Mm-hmm. So New Year's is, of course, the start of a new cycle, the start of a new year, and this is the example of the fresh start effect that's best known, but it turns out that this effect is actually much broader than New Year's. So even something as simple as the beginning of a new week is the start of a new cycle that can motivate people to pursue their aspirations more aggressively. It feels like you have a fresh start and a clean slate. And so all these new cycles, be it the beginning of a new birth year, so you've just celebrated your 40th birthday, or the beginning of a new month, new week, or following a holiday, all of those inspire fresh start feelings.
And so, I mean, obviously this is kind of an idea that's been in the culture for some time, but is there real data on the fact that people perceive these things as fresh start and really do this kind of stuff? I mean, beyond just New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we do in our paper is actually provide the first data showing this beyond New Year's resolutions. And this is actually joint work with a phenomenal doctoral student who's the lead author, Heng-Chen Dai, and with a fabulous collaborator, Jason Reese, who's a professor at Harvard Business School. Mm-hmm. And we found this phenomenon of fresh starts really fascinating. We felt that they were prevalent in the culture, but no one had ever studied them besides the New Year's effect. And we felt that was much too narrow of a framing. So we went out and collected data to see if this is a broader phenomenon. We found it is. So I'll give you one example. I think this will be an intuitive one for everyone. We looked at Google searches for the term diet. So Google actually allows you to download daily search volume for any term you want. And we downloaded, I think, almost a decade of search volume for the term diet. And what we could see is that there were these very clear fresh start cycles where people are searching for diet more on Monday than Tuesday, more on Tuesday than Wednesday, et cetera. So it sort of declines as the week progresses. Mm-hmm. And we saw similar cycles. Of course, New Year's is a huge spike. We saw similar cycles around months, around weeks, and also following federal holidays. Seem to get renewed by these breaks and feel that it's a fresh start. I'm going back to work today, and it's a new me, and that's when they're searching for the term diet. And we have some other data that I'll tell you about more about later, also looking at gym attendance and the creation of goal contracts on websites.
Cool. And so, I mean, so it seems like this is sort of a ubiquitous phenomena of sort of jumping into new starts at the beginning of things, but it really is kind of any sort of new start, like Monday counts it just as well as New Year's, or?
Yeah, so New Year's is larger than Monday for sure. New Year's is sort of the biggest spike, and that's when we all talk about it. And there may be, you could even think of this as a cultural phenomenon where we all pile on and everyone's asking each other about the resolutions. And because it's so social, New Year's becomes a particularly prominent moment for this to take place. But we see it again following birthdays. We see it at the beginning of a new week. Again, these upticks are a little smaller than New Year's. Everyone isn't talking about it and asking you about your resolutions every Monday. So, of course, it's not as pronounced of an effect, but it's there, and that's really exciting.
That's cool. And so, I mean, does it stick? Do people just Google search diet, or do you actually see people following through with these new starts that come at these weird time breaks?
That's a great question. So the first data set we looked at was this Google search data set, but then we wanted to say, look, that's just intention data. Mm-hmm. Just Googling, maybe they never even take it further than that. So can we actually collect data on real behavior? And so actually what we did there is we turned to the gym, and we collected a data set from the University of Pennsylvania's gym over a year and a half. where we could observe the gym attendance decisions of all of the undergraduates at the University of Pennsylvania, anonymously, of course, so we aren't tracking Bobby Sue and seeing everything she does specifically. And what we can tell is that actually people go to the gym at a higher rate following these fresh starts. And while there is a decline, so over the course of a week or a month or following a birthday, the effect does wear off. It's sort of lasting. And so it's getting people to go more. It's actually creating a real behavioral response. And there is some period of time over which the decay is subtle enough that I think they're getting real benefits out of it.
Huh, that's cool. And so, because that was going to be my next question, is like, how long did these things last? And is trying to make a fresh start on a temporal boundary better for you than like at 3:15 on some Thursday deciding you're going to start your diet or start going to the gym or something?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'd say that the answer is still a little bit unclear about how long they last. And part of the reason for that is that each landmark appears to be a little different. So when we look at the data, of course, the Monday effect doesn't last the same amount of time as the New Year's effect, which doesn't last the same amount of time as the beginning of a new month or following a federal holiday or following a birthday. But none of these decline over the course of just a few days, with the exception, of course, of the day of the week effect. They seem to stick around for a while, so that's promising. The other thing I want to mention when we think about whether or not it's beneficial to leverage these temporal landmarks, or if it's just so fleeting that it's irrelevant, is that one thing we really think people can do is take advantage of this opportunity to take an action that will have long-term benefits.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just decide to diet and it only lasts a couple of days, that's not going to be terribly effective. But if you decide, look, I've been meaning to enroll in my employer's 401k, and I haven't actually gotten around to it. I'm going to do that today. It's a fresh start. Well, that's going to have a lasting effect because you have to make one decision on one moment, but then it's going to continue to affect you over time. That enrollment decision, now you're going to have automatic deductions from your each paycheck, and you're going to accumulate savings. So there are things like that we can do. Or scheduling an annual physical or a colonoscopy. These one-off decisions that we can make at these fresh start moments may be particularly impactful.
That's cool. So the idea would be find ways to harness your fresh start moments, not just for these long-term habit things you want to do, but use them to get the energy to do the one-time thing that's going to have a longer lasting effect down the line too.
That's right. Exactly. Because we know that then you don't have to worry as much about wear off.
Mm-hmm. And so the other question is like, how can we harness these fresh starts in times where we're not in a fresh start? It's not my birthday. It's not a federal holiday. It's some random Wednesday. Like, are these things flexible? Can we make these things up? Is there some way to kind of frame them so you start afresh when it's not New Year's to get these things going when you need to use these?
It's a great question, and it's something that we're actually investigating in current experiments. Mm-hmm. To what extent can we reframe a more mundane moment as a fresh start? And we're very hopeful about it. So it does appear that you can reframe simple days. So for instance, we just ran one experiment where we reframed I think it was May 15th. We reminded University of Pennsylvania students that May 15th is actually the last day of the school year in one condition. And in another condition, we didn't mention that. And May 15th suddenly takes on this very special meaning when we remind you that it's the last day of the school year, and people were much more willing to sign up to receive reminders about goals they'd set, for instance, on that date. So there may be ways to think about a day that looks mundane on the calendar and imbue it with some special quality that will make it easier to feel like it's a fresh start opportunity.
And presumably you can do this for yourself, but you can also do this for other people and for organizations potentially too, right?
We hope so. We certainly hope so. And that's one of the goals here, is to see if we can help organizations use these fresh start moments to nudge employees towards healthier behaviors. And also to potentially frame different moments on a work calendar as fresh start moments, be it something as trivial as a work anniversary. Maybe that can be used to encourage people to start tackling new goals.
And so all this raises the question of why these things matter, right? Like, why isn't it just as easy to start like, some random Thursday at 3 p.m. as it is to start on January 1st? Do we know why these things seem to get us all motivated to be better? Or any ideas?
That's a great question. And we have sort of two sets of studies. One set of studies has just looked in the field and has shown evidence that these moments are really impactful in terms of people's actual decisions. So that doesn't shed light on mechanism. But we've actually done a separate set of studies in the laboratory where we've specifically tried to disentangle what's going on at a cognitive level, what is the process that's driving this. Mm-hmm. And the evidence we've found is that there's sort of two things going on. One thing that happens is when these fresh start moments arise, be it at the beginning of a new week or a new year or a birthday, we feel as though there's a segmentation happening. So we feel more distinct from our past selves. That me in 2013, because I've come over this boundary, it feels like a very different person than me today. These boundaries segregate us from our past selves. And as a result of that, we feel like our past failures are more separated and more part of the past. So we feel we have a clean slate, our past failures are behind us, and we're much more optimistic about our ability to pursue our goals, which we always hope to pursue. We always want to be a better person, but sometimes we feel more bogged down by our past failures. So that's part of it. Another thing that we've noticed happens, and we haven't proved this so much in the lab, has seen it in past research, is that when we feel more segmented, when we have these big sort of temporal landmarks arise, they can cause us to step back and think about the big picture. So we celebrate the beginning of a new year or a birthday, and it sort of separates us from all the minutia of life and makes us think, what really matters? It's my 40th birthday. What's actually important to me? Or it's 2014. What do I care about this year? And taking that kind of a big picture view also leads us to focus more on our goals and our aspirations. So we think those are the two fundamental drivers of this effect, though there may be some additional things going on as well.
That's cool. So it's both kind of getting more abstract and having this kind of new version of yourself. I mean, how much of the first part of it just boils down to kind of an optimism bias at these kind of temporal breaks? Is this just kind of part and parcel of optimism generally at the start of New Year's and at the start of these kind of temporal breaks?
It may be. I think that idea is very related to what we're thinking about here. The point that I think is important is that we're always sort of optimistic, honestly. We may be more optimistic at these times in part because we feel segregated from our past failures. So in essence, that optimism may be driven by the same mechanism that we feel is driving this effect. And optimism is just sort of a part of the chain.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so if we were to use the fresh start effect to our advantage, what advice could you give our viewers about kind of how to use, we're 1 week into New Year's resolutions. Should we start thinking of the 1 week in temporal boundary as we get moving, or?
Yeah, no, I think the answer is when you feel yourself sort of slipping and you feel, look, I'm not tackling my goals as aggressively as I'd like. Think about, when can I start fresh? When is the next moment on the calendar that looks to me like a good opportunity for a fresh start? And maybe it's going to be next Monday. Maybe that's what looks best to you, and say, I'm promising myself that I'm going to tackle these things next Monday. And that is going to be a moment when you may be particularly motivated to actually follow through.
That's cool. And so the fresh start effect isn't the only work you guys have been up to, kind of looking at things that are relevant to kind of keeping ourselves on track with goals. You've also been looking at a phenomenon you refer to as temptation bundling, which I find particularly cool and I've been trying to use myself. So hopefully our viewers will enjoy it too. So what is this temptation bundling that you guys have been looking at?
Sure, yeah. So this is actually an idea I had when I was a doctoral student. So it's a very old idea that has just finally come out in a paper, which is always exciting. Finally sort of got the funding together and did this big experiment. But the basic idea is actually pretty simple. The idea is that we have all sorts of self-control struggles in our lives, and that we may be able to actually tackle some of them by leveraging and combining different self-control problems. Now, let me be much more concrete by giving you an example. So I have a problem whereby I want to exercise, but at the end of a long day, I really struggle to drag myself to the gym.
Yeah, so that's you're not alone in that one, I'm sure.
Yeah. I gather that from talking to other folks. So I struggle to get to the gym to work out. It just doesn't appeal. Mm-hmm. So that's one willpower problem. A second willpower problem I have is that I love thriller page-turner novels, and I really have trouble putting them down. I have the same problem with TV shows, but let's focus on novels first. So once I start a book like The Hunger Games, I want to spend all my time reading it, and really I should be doing my work. So those are two different self-control problems that I'm facing. And the idea of temptation bundling is that by actually combining the two, I can solve both problems at once. So for example, imagine I only let myself read trashy novels, read these thrillers while exercising at the gym. Now I'm actually going to find myself craving trips to the gym at the end of a long day to find out what happens next in my novel, and I won't waste time at home reading the novel when I should be writing my next paper, for instance. And not only that, but I'll actually enjoy the gym and the novel more combined because I won't feel guilty reading the novel, and time's going to fly while I'm exercising. I won't even notice the pain of the workout. So that's the basic concept, is that by bundling our temptations with things that require willpower to achieve, we can actually solve two problems at once.
And so, I mean, it sounds really good. Is there evidence that that sort of bundling actually works to get people to the gym more? Have you guys tested it?
Yeah. So we just published a very exciting first experiment showing that temptation bundling has real value. So we did an experiment where we randomly assigned one group of people to get access to thrilling audio novels of their choice. So The Hunger Games was actually the most popular novel in our study. And the people in our treatment group could only access and listen to those novels while they were exercising, whereas members of our control group had no restrictions. They could exercise whenever they wanted, and they could access iPods whenever they wanted. And what we found is that this restriction, where people are forced to bundle their temptations, increased exercise initially by about 56%. So
how did you restrict their access to it? You just gave them a copy of it and they could only use it at the gym, or how did that work?
We actually locked away iPods that contained these audio novels that they'd started listening to in a monitored locker at the gym. So we could tell when they were checking it out, and we ensured that they were only using it while they worked out. That's how we did it. We actually had an intermediate group, since you're asking about implementation, where people were given these audio novels and asked to self-restrict. They were encouraged to try to just listen while exercising, and that actually proved pretty effective too. So that was sort of right in between the control group and the group where we forced bundling. So that's promising news as well. So people have the ability to self-restrict enough to at least get some benefits from this idea.
Mm-hmm. And so you found they exercise about 50% more was the figure? Sorry.
That's right. In the treatment group, they exercise initially about 50% more. And in the group where they're just trying to self-restrict these two things, they exercise about 30% more.
Cool. And so then, of course, with exercise, the hard questions come, but like, how long does this, is this a forever solution? Like throughout the whole book? Does it end immediately once the book is over? What do we know about the longevity of these things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so the good news is it lasted for a little while. We saw the effects lasted for about 7 weeks in our study. And then what happened is we did the study with a population at a university gym. Mm-hmm. The gym closed for Thanksgiving. People left campus. Maybe they forgot about the storyline in their audio novel. We're not completely sure. But when they came back from Thanksgiving break, the effect was completely gone. There was absolutely no remainder of this effect. So the good news is that we know that this can work, and it lasted for about 7 weeks. The bad news is, and this is actually consistent with past research on gym habits and how easily they're disrupted by these kinds of breaks in our schedules. The bad news is when we have a disruption, the whole thing sort of falls apart. So that means we have a lot of work to do to figure out how do we re-engage people with this kind of content? Should we, after these kinds of breaks, should we be paying people to come back and listen to the next chapter in their book, or giving them a little snippet at home just to re-engage them and then tell them if you want to hear what happens next, you'll need to come back to the gym? Or is there some other solution? So we're not really sure.
It also raises the possibility of having technology do this for yourself, because it sounds like it's pretty good if you kind of set up the self-control problem yourself, but it probably works better if you have some external agent controlling it for you, is what the data seem to show, right? Yeah.
That's right. And I think part of that is simply that if an external agent is involved, there's no cheating, whereas you can sort of wiggle your way out of commitments to yourself more easily.
Yeah, I mean, this raises a broader question, and I think behavioral decision-making research deals with all the time, which is this question of nudges, as you use the term, or kind of technology that are these sort of ways of using external things to kind of deal with self-control. And this is the kind of thing that rubs some people the wrong way, right? That if you have an app that kind of forces you to do something, or if the gym is set up such that you only log into your favorite iPod tunes when you're there, something about this feels like we're not living up to our aspirations in the way we might like, or at least the way some folks might like. How do folks in behavioral decision-making respond to some of those kinds of critiques?
I think my best answer is that I'm okay with this as a crutch. We don't have any evidence that it's harmful for people to rely on these external sources to help with their self-control problems. All we have is evidence that it improves outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's what I really care about. It, we have an obesity crisis in this country, and we want to figure out, how do we get people to lose weight? How do we get them going to the gym more? How do we get them to take their medication?
Yeah.
How can we make sure that people do all these things that will dramatically increase their chances for a long and healthy life? And if that means that they have to rely on crutches, then I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you on that one too. But I mean, the other thing that comes up whenever we see these kind of short-term fixes is that for some of the kinds of decisions we need to make that would help us, as you pointed out, the short-term fix is all we need, right? Like just making the appointment to go to the financial planner will help you, or just enrolling in your 401k is going to do the work for you. But for other kinds of self-control failures, it's all about setting up the right habits. Do we have any insights from behavioral decision making about how to do these things? I mean, you've talked about some data that suggests you can get people to do these things over the course of at least several weeks, which is often better than people do on their own. But do we have
but we want lifetimes,
or just like habits that stick, or that kind of take on automaticity of their own, perhaps? So
yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah.
Well, first, let me start by saying that one of my favorite papers that's come out in recent years is a paper by Gary Charnas and Yuri Ganese, showing that if you pay people to visit the gym 8 times over the course of, I believe, 1 month, as opposed to just paying them to visit once, and then you eliminate the incentives and look at their behavior in the following month, what you see is that those who are paid to go 8 times go significantly more in the next month afterwards than they did than members of the group who were only paid to go once. So just getting people to engage in a behavior repeatedly can leave and build a lasting habit. So that's some exciting news on that front. So if we can do things where we get people in the habit, we have them repeat the behavior over and over again, even by paying them, that's one way we can see lasting change. Though, unfortunately, like my gym study, these kinds of interventions also eventually seem to wear off. Another thing we know is that commitment devices can be a really effective way to produce long-term change. So for listeners who aren't familiar with that term, what a commitment device is it's creating a contract, and you can do this on a website like www.stick.com.
With 2
where you
stick.
Yeah, 2 Ks, stick, STICKK.com. And the second K has extra emphasis. It's capitalized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can go to a website like this, and you can choose a goal. Say, I want to lose 10 pounds by the end of the month. Mm-hmm. And then you can actually create a monetary incentive to do so. You set stakes. So you give them your credit card number, and you say, I want to forfeit $100 if I don't achieve this goal. And, you choose where that money will go. Choose a charity, for instance, that it'll go to. And then you choose a referee who will actually enforce this, and they will check in and confirm whether or not you've indeed followed through on your goal. And now this goal has some bite. So now you've got an incentive behind it, and you can create a goal that's persistent. You could have a goal where you're going to lose a pound every month for a year, or where you're going to maintain your weight and put money behind it. And these kinds of commitment contracts have actually been shown to have a positive effect over pretty long-term periods. So we've seen weight loss studies over as long as 16 weeks where these things are having a big effect. There was recently a 6-month trial on smoking cessation with a commitment device, and that was very effective. And so we know that over longer periods, we can put into place these kinds of commitment contracts, and that can be an effective way to create longer-term habits.
That's cool. Yeah, I used to have it going to the gym, stick.com, that worked pretty well because I didn't want to have to forfeit $50 to the George Bush Memorial Library. And so
that's their most popular one, apparently.
The anti-charity is a useful device there. Cool. Well, we've kind of gone through kind of a bunch of cool things that you guys have been up to trying to get us to make better decisions. I thought I'd end with letting you give our viewers some tips. I mean, you've heard some ideas already, start fresh, make a stick, and download a really cheesy novel that's locked away in your gym locker. If you had to come up with kind of maybe 3 other tips for folks to take into the new year, what would you suggest, or either from your work or other work that you know of?
Yeah, well, so I have one study that I really love and that I'm plugging as a means to help people with their goals, and that is creating really concrete plans. Now, there's amazing work done by Gollwitzer and others showing that prompting people to think about the where, when, and how of following through on their goals can increase follow-through. There's two major reasons for this, and probably more as well, but two major ones are it reduces forgetting. Once you said next Tuesday at noon, I'm doing thing X, I'm going to the dentist, it's much less likely that you'll forget, because when Tuesday at noon comes, boom, this pops into your memory. And second, you've made a commitment to yourself and sometimes publicly to others as well, and it's much harder to back down on a concrete commitment than a vague one. So one thing I'd encourage is to write down a concrete plan. I did a study showing that this is very effective for increasing flu shots. When people receive a reminder that just prompts them to write the date and the time when they intend to get a flu shot, we increase flu shot turnout by about 4 percentage points from 30% costlessly. And this isn't even public, this is private. So think through the where and the when and the how of achieving your goals. Don't just say I'm going to go to the gym more, but say instead, I'm going to go to the gym every day after work at 5 p.m. This is the gym I'm going to go to. I'm going to drive there, and I'm going to meet my friend Bob, and we're going to work out together.
Yeah.
And that brings me to the second suggestion I'd have, and that is try to actually bring other people into your commitments. So if you're going to meet Bob or June, or pick your favorite silly name or nice name, a friend, if you're going to meet them at the gym, it's much harder to back down on that kind of a commitment. And much like sick puts money on the line, if you say you're going to meet someone, now you're putting a friendship on the line if you bail.
Yeah.
And so try to make commitments to others. And further, when you make a plan, a concrete plan, make it publicly. Don't just tell yourself you'll do this. Tell lots of other people. Post it on Facebook. And then there's going to be a shame element to failing to follow through. And people might even nag you, hey, did you go to the gym every day this week like you said you would? And those kinds of social support systems are going to increase the likelihood that you follow through as well. So I guess those are my 3 tips. Make public commitments, make plans that are very concrete, and try to use your social network to improve the likelihood that you'll follow through on these things by either making commitments to meet others or shaming yourself if you fail.
Excellent. Well, in honor of that, I'm committing to going vegan for the first month of 2014. That's my New Year's resolution, which is now public on Blogging Heads in the internet forever. Are you also doing New Year's resolutions this year? Do folks in behavioral decision making actually make resolutions at the start of the year?
Oh, absolutely. And mine is to spend less time checking email and more time actually working on the papers that I need to write.
Well, for that, we should probably end for time so you can get back to your papers and I can get back to plant-based delights. But I want to thank you again for joining us on the Mind Report, and hopefully you've given lots of suggestions that will help folks in their New Year's to come.